Okay, so this is the last theory for our relational goals topic. It's called Anderson's cognitive valence theory. And this theory looks at a specific moment in a relationship or given a relationship. And specifically, this theory makes predictions about how people would respond to an intimate behavior from other people. And usually, these other people or this communication partner or this intimate behavior center is not in a romantic relationship with this target person. So, in other words, this Anderson's cognitive valence theory is mostly applied to non-romantic relationship, such as your friends, your classmates, your acquaintances, or even strangers. And it's not quite applied to romantic relationship. What's the reason? We will see it when we look at this theory. You will know why this theory is not applied, is not usually applied to analyze the romantic relationship. So specifically, this theory kind of give us a diagram how people would make a decision when they face an intimate behavior from other people. And this theory proposed these 5 steps, or I should say 4 steps, after people receive such an intimate behavior. And then they're gonna go through these 4 steps, and for each step, they're gonna make a decision. And this decision will decide what's the next step. So let's kind of start from the first step. Let's say our friend Tracy, she increases some intimacy behavior towards you, okay, such as pat your back or give you a kiss on your cheek, etc. So let's say Tracy suddenly gives you a very intimate behavior, and the next step proposed by this theory is this perception stage. So we may have 2 outcomes for this step. The first one is that we do notice this behavior, and the other option or the other outcome is this behavior, this intimate behavior is not perceived. Okay, 2 outcomes, perceived and not perceived. Let's look at this first outcome. When this behavior is just so tiny, so subtle, and we don't even notice it. So behavior not perceived. So when we ignore this behavior intentionally or unintentionally, this will directly lead to the final outcome, which is we're gonna ignore this behavior because we simply didn't perceive it, we didn't notice it. That is pretty simple. Let's go back to this second step, perception step. So let's say for this time, we do notice this intimate behavior being perceived. And then the next step, we come to this arousal step. That is, we're gonna appraise or evaluate how arousing this behavior is. Okay, and we may have 3 outcomes. The first one is that this behavior is pretty low arousal, such as just a tiny touch on your finger. So in this situation, even though you noticed it, but you tend to consider it as an accident touch. It is nothing. So if you consider it is just a low arousal level, and you tend to ignore it, that is the outcome for this level of arousal. Okay. So again, if you feel like, oh, this means nothing, it is just an accidental touch, and you tend to ignore it. That is a likely outcome of this behavior. Let's get back to this arousal stage and look at another possible outcome. Let's say if you consider it as a moderate arousal, it caught your attention and you feel it is something, such as patting your shoulder, touch your back, etc. So for this situation, you feel there is something going on, but it's not a big deal. In this situation, we evaluate it as a moderate arousal. And then you move to the 4th step or the 4th phase of this theory, which is you are gonna activate your cognitions. You begin to use your knowledge to consider whether this moderate aroused behavior is appropriate or not. So you begin to activate your cognitive schemata to evaluate this behavior, such as you would consider whether your relationship is appropriate to develop such intimate behaviors, whether this environment or this current surroundings, this context is okay to have some intimate behaviors. If it is a really public setting, public environment, and you tend to consider it is not quite appropriate to do that. And you are gonna also use activate your person schemata for this particular person, whether you like him or not. Okay, so if you say yes for all these schemata, your relationship is appropriate to have some intimate behaviors, and this environment is okay to do so. And you also like this person. You have a very positive schemata towards this person. And this will lead to the outcome, which is, we call it reciprocity. You'll be happy, you'll be very pleasant to return these intimate behaviors, such as pat back on Tracy's shoulder or back, or even increase these intimate behaviors, such as giving her a kiss. So this is a reciprocity outcome, which is you are gonna reciprocate this intimate behavior. So we've just discussed this reciprocity occurs when we have positive schemata for this stage. But what if we have some negative schemata here, such as he is my boss, or Tracy is my boss? I don't think it is very proper to have such an intimate relationship. Or we are in a very public setting, it is not quite good. Or I just don't like Tracy. I don't want to have any intimate relationship or behavior or communication with Tracy. So apparently you are having some negative schemata here at this stage. And if you have some negative schemata here, then you are gonna have a different outcome, which is compensation. Compensation is you are freaking out, you are gonna reject and say no to this intimate behavior. Okay, so so far we've discussed these three possible outcomes. The first one is you are gonna ignore it, and this one is called reciprocity. That is a very positive feedback to Tracy. Return this intimate behavior, or even increase this intimate behavior back to her. And third one is something called compensation. We are gonna step back, say no, reject these intimate behaviors. So let's come back to this arousal part. We just discussed the possible outcomes if we consider this intimate behavior as low arousal and moderate arousal. Let's talk about what if this behavior is considered to be high arousal, such as a sudden kiss on your cheek or even on your lips. So in this situation, you will be freaking out. You don't need to activate or use any of your schemata, and this high arousal behavior will directly lead to this compensation result. You'll be freaking out and you'll step back and say no to this highly arousing behavior. So this is this Anderson cognitive valence theory. I hope you like this theory. And after we talked about this theory, I think you may have an understanding about why this theory is not applied to romantic relationship. Well, sometimes, yes, when you are still kind of in the stage of getting to know each other, you're not that intimate. But I would say this theory is mostly used to analyze relationships in non-romantic relationships. So if you have a if you feel good about this theory, let's do some exercise. So I'm gonna present you two scenarios, and based on this scenario, based on this theory, what is the likely outcome of this scenario? Let's take a look. Okay, this is the first scenario. You are sitting in a dimly lit restaurant with your supervisor. Your boss moves closer to you and slides a hand over yours. Okay. Wow, this is tricky. So how would you respond to this intimate behavior based on this model? So of course, it is something big. Of course, you're gonna notice this behavior. And in terms of this arousal level, I would say it is kind of a moderately arousing. And next, you're gonna activate your schemata about the situation, about the context, about this person, and about this relationship. And in a normal situation is that boss is not the right person to have a romantic or intimate relationship. I mean, in normal situations. So you are gonna have a negative schemata or feedback for this step, and it will lead you to this compensation outcome. You are gonna say no to this intimate behavior to your boss. That is the first scenario. Let's look at the second one. You are on a first date with someone you don't find attractive or interesting. At this moment, you are walking by side down a public sidewalk. It's around 8:30 p.m. and you are wondering how you will get through this night. Your date stops walking and suddenly kisses you on the cheek very close to your lips. Okay, so definitely you're gonna notice this behavior in terms of this arousal level. I would say it is something big, highly arousing. And you don't need to go through this cognitive evaluation, or you don't even have time to do that. And you'll be freaking out and directly jump to the final stage, which is the compensation. You're gonna say no to this date, to this person. Okay, that is this Anderson's cognitive valence theory. And in the exam, I'm gonna give you guys a similar questions, give you guys a scenario, and I'll be specifically telling you the outcome of this cognitive schemata or your evaluation of this arousal level. And then ask you to identify the final, what is a likely outcome based on this theory for this scenario. So that is the 3 topics for this relational goals, and I hope you guys like it.